This is FIBA Podcast. Thank you for joining us in our morning daily devotion.
Dear people of God, today we will look at a passage which describes an almost comic scene, but with very serious overtones. Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. Matthew chapter 7 begins with a stern instruction regarding judging others. Don't judge others, Jesus says, or you will be judged. Well, that is fair enough. But then Jesus follows it up with saying, with the measure you measure to others, it will be measured to you. It almost sounds like an eye for an eye, doesn't it? Now that's incongruous in the midst of a teaching that turned the diktats of the world upside down. A short while earlier, Jesus in chapter 6, 38 to 42, turned that eye for an eye rule upside down with the instruction to turn the other cheek. Perhaps to clarify such misinterpretation, Jesus gave them a classic example of a judgmental attitude in the comic example of a man with a plank in his eye trying to remove a speck of sawdust in his brother's eye. While the scene described is the stuff of slapstick comedy, Jesus calls the one who would indulge in such an absurd activity a hypocrite, a term he generally reserved for Pharisees. Double standards always annoyed Jesus, and he called it out strongly. Take, for example, this incident of the woman caught in adultery. The judgmental crowd was eager to condemn the woman for her exposed sin, completely oblivious of the huge load of sin each of them carried, hidden from society, but clearly visible to the holy God. Jesus drew their attention to it when he asked the sinless one to cast the first stone. We naturally tend to think well of ourselves, unless damaged by abuse. What we think and say and do seem right to us since we have a backstory to it, a story of our previous experience, our emotions, our logical justification for it. And so we all carry invisible planks, even though they are obvious to everyone else. At the same time, there is in the best of us a desire to feel better than others, and the easiest way to do that is to highlight their faults, which in comparison makes us look and feel better. Now, judging needs to have a standard. Societies have struggled to establish and maintain standards of judgment, which is why we have the complex legal systems of the world in place. But with all of it, so little justice prevails, because each individual strives to use the provisions of the law to justify their own actions. Selfish value systems prevail in fallen human world at all levels. Selfish value systems call for someone or the other to pay collateral damage. But there is so little consciousness of it. From domestic arguments to policies that trigger war, everyone seems to be right in their own eyes. Jesus calls this hypocrisy. While we forgive ourselves and justify our attitude and actions because we know our backstory, which seems to us a very valid reason for our behavior, we do not extend that courtesy to the others who respond or behave in the same way. For others, we have a stern and elevated code of conduct which condemns them while making us look and feel good. This self-centered value system and the self-serving manipulation of standards is what creates, sustains, and escalates conflict. Within the body of Christ, we are called to build one another up to holy living. So helping a fellow believer with the speck is perfectly acceptable. However, if the same sawdust has accumulated in our eyes to the point of becoming a blind spot for ourselves, and yet we are eager to help our brothers and sisters critically removing their specks, Jesus calls it hypocrisy. Criticism, calling out wrongs, helping one another in our journey of holiness are all legitimate. But when these happen in a context that is far removed from our consciousness of our own fallibility, that is duplicity, hypocrisy. Why do we look at the speck in our brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in our own eye? Essentially because we have cushioned standards for ourselves and lofty hard ones for others. If we really need to build one another and be built up by one another, in the words of an early church father, Chrysostom, let us correct, not as an adversary exacting a penalty, but as a physician providing medicines. May I invite you today to introspect on instances in this last week when you have in all good faith even attempted to execute justice, seeking to penalize? Would you seek God's grace to go back to that person or people involved and initiate the process of healing that would edify all concerned? Let us, speaking the truth in love, in all things, both our speech and our lives, let us grow up in all things, following the example of Jesus, who is the head.
Dear listener, we are here to stand with you in your time of need. We want to pray with you and for your prayer request. Do you need someone to talk to? We are here for you. Call us or send a message at +91 636 425 2164 +91 636 425 2164. God bless you.